Sorry, that's a little loud.
We are awake.
Not that I'm not loud enough to begin with. It is 6:02 p.m. on the day before Thanksgiving. Buckley special study session regarding the 24 budget. I believe I was the one that made the motion for this study session because all of us are on different committees. We've had different committee presentations. And then obviously this is budget time, so it has to come together because we have to do our due diligence to pass the budget. So I thought we would sit down here, and if there are questions that need to be answered, and I see that we have some handouts from city staff. And I would ask that these be explained before any questions.
Happy to.
We can do our due diligence because this needs to be brought forward next Tuesday. We don't want to go into December. So that's why I think we agreed to be here tonight to ask questions. So with that, Director Hines.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Yes, we did pass out some handouts tonight. I apologize for not being able to get you those earlier. It was a quick turnaround on things. Wanted to go through this one first with the green and the blue stripes on it. This is the list of proposed changes that have happened since the prelim budget came out to you that we're proposing for the final that would be in the ordinance for adoption next week. And so just wanted to kind of touch base on those. They do address some things that we've already did talk to council about at our last meeting. The first one, there's the blue changes, and under that heading is the 2023 changes. So these are changes that affect the year end estimates, which then affect the ending balance. So that carries over into affecting the 24 beginning balance. The main one is on the revenue side, reallocating the interest revenue from some of the other operating funds where it's not restricted into the general fund. So that provides $143,710 to the general fund. And then the reductions you'll see in the other funds. Cumulative reserve fund being the largest, since that's the one with the $5 million balance, it earns the most interest as well. And then the other change really is just an administrative housekeeping item. There was some equipment purchased out of the equipment reserve that really was not capital related. So it should have been out of the operating funds. It wasn't a huge amount, but it did when I, obviously move the expenditure to the correct amount, change the estimates for year end. And since it affects fund balance, I wanted to just make sure that was disclosed of why the fund balances for those funds would have been changing. Under the green heading of 2024, and the same adjustment for the reallocation of interest to the general fund. So by moving 24's budgeted amount from the non-restricted funds to the general fund, that increased the general fund revenue $145,760. Also with the increase of the insurance, so we've had budgeted 17%, we found out it was 21%. That increases the transfers from the operating funds that pay the general fund back their portion of interest. So water and sewer, storm, the capital funds, all those that do have transfers into the general fund to pay back the insurance had to be increased. So the 53,277 is an increase to the general fund. Then about the third one from the bottom, we did revise the sales tax projection for the TBD down by 50,000 in reviewing the materials of what the next steps would be if council passed the budget with that 1.1% of sales tax in there. Then there's only certain times that DOR will institute a sales tax rate change. January's time had to be submitted by October, and then the next time is April. So we would be able to make that change effective with the April tax rate changes, but sales tax is on a 2-month lag. So it would go into effect April 1st. April sales tax, we don't see until June. So we would really only get June through December of revenue next year. So didn't want to overstate that. So we reduced that estimate down by 50,000. And then next year will just be kind of a learning year on that to see how that's coming in. And then 25 will be able to be a full year. On the expenditure side, although I had budgeted all of the transfer into the general fund for the new ICAP allocation, a few of the funds that haven't paid in previous years had got left out. So correcting that and adding the transfer outs for some of those other smaller operating funds. We did need to increase playground equipment replacement in the 035. The Elk Heights playground is in severe need of replacing and is basically has to be shut down. I think there's some hazard items on it. So
Yeah, that playground was gifted to the city by the contractor, and the original equipment that was installed was part of the original construction of that area. So it's not necessarily up to the level that we would typically install or has the lifespan of something that the city would install. So we're looking at replacing that structure. The swing set's in good shape, but the playground structure itself needs to be replaced next year.
and then updating the transfer out, the insurance transfers to the general fund for that change in the revenue that's up top. So those were the proposed changes and things that have come up since the preliminary budget was presented to council. This one, the large chart. This is an updated one, table showing all of these changes that we just talked about are incorporated into these numbers. And then, so that provides what the new ending fund balance would be by fund as well. All funds are still solvent with all of the changes and still have sufficient fund balance. And so I wanted to provide you with what the new numbers would be if all those changes are adopted with the budget. Any questions on those changes or the overall balance?
Councilmember Burbank.
I just have a question, and it's more thinking in the future with playgrounds when they're if things are gifted to us. So because there's several developments that are in the works so how often does it happen that something gets gifted to the city in past of like a playground being gifted? And if that's going to happen again, is the city ever involved in making sure that that equipment is up to standard before it's gifted to us so that we don't have to worry about the longevity? I mean, obviously like playground equipment, right, has to be replaced, but I'm just trying to think,
I've never
when things are gifted to us like
Sure.
that.
I've never seen it happen before.
Okay.
So I don't think it's very common.
Okay,
My understanding is that this playground structure was it's placed below the entire development, and
right,
the city council, though I haven't verified this, should have accepted the gift
okay,
at the time that it was made, and that's what would happen in the future. So if we were offered to be gifted a playground in order to maintain it, same thing with it, for example, a stormwater pond, the city council would need to accept that gift
okay,
and then have a discussion for the ongoing maintenance. And at that time, in theory, would be able to discuss if there was certain equipment that you wanted to see installed.
okay. But could that be things that are like stipulations if we chose to gift something like that in the future that we, like,
We don't have a code that
Oh, okay.
pertains necessarily to, I would say, this exact category. So
okay,
we don't have standards for us to accept a gift of a playground.
okay,
I think that because of that, there is some flexibility that we could build in at the time that we accepted
Okay.
that gift. The council has, through the quasi judicial changes that we made earlier this year, it no longer reviews design review, but
Mhm.
playground structures aren't typically something that's clearly identified at the design review level. Even we don't see, for example, like the exact equipment that gets installed.
mhm,
That would happen in this scenario at the time that we would accept the gift. And
okay,
so if council had a concern with the type of equipment that was going to be installed, I think we could have a conversation with the contractor or the developer at that time.
okay. Because where that playground is now, who's liable if somebody gets hurt? Is that city?
It's the city.
Okay, so, okay,
Mhm.
Alright.
It's a city park.
Yeah, that's something maybe we can touch on in the coming year.
Mhm.
I don't know everything about this by any stretch of the imagination, but my understanding is we currently, the way we have it currently set up, the developer of X number of lots can either build a park or pay the park fee, the park impact fee.
Mhm.
And so that's something we should look into in the future, because I know we've had multiple issues over the last, 8 to 10 years of, well, the park, yes, they built a park, but it's tiny.
Yeah.
And it's not, doesn't serve that community even, or
Yeah.
whatever. That's something we can look in as a whole, I think.
In our design review guidelines for multifamily or new plat developments, there's a
Mhm.
certain amount of open space that has to be set aside.
Okay.
But the type of fixture that gets placed in that open space is pretty broad. Other cities do have a certain requirement for playground structures to be installed or children's play areas to be installed if you have a certain number of units, something that Buckley doesn't have, that I think we could definitely incorporate into our design standards. And as
Okay.
part of that, I don't see why we couldn't say that it had to have a certain life cycle.
Okay,
That I don't think that there would be anything, but we would involve the city attorney to make sure.
got it. Okay, thank you.
It would be advantageous, I think, to us, to the community,
Mhm.
not to us, but because it's a simple numbers game.
Yep.
If the park impact fee is $3,000 per parcel and they add it up and, okay, well, we can make a $25,000
Something
investment
really
instead of
cheap.
spending 80,000 paying the city.
Mm-hmm.
We need to, balance that out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Councilmember Anderson.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, I'm all for parks, but that one just being right there, I don't really see it used often. So I feel like us being on the hook for the 25,000, like, is there any way to talk with their HOA? For
They gifted it to us and it's
Oh.
considered a city park. So
okay.
it's part of the
And that's-
city's park
Okay.
inventory.
I think that's usually how it goes, at the final plat or when it's.
No,
all-
typically it would remain part of the HOA. So it would be part of their code covenants and restrictions to maintain whatever that structure was. But in this case, it was,
Is it because it's
Donate
down
it
at
to
the
the
bottom of the
city.
hill?
I don't know.
Do we have to
It's
choose
been-
to-
We
Can-
would have had to have accepted the donation. And so the
but
city.
do we have to maintain it right now? Or can
could-
we
We could.
take it
We
down?
could take it down and close it.
Councilmember Osama.
I was just gonna ask these developers, when they're building these, I mean, why is the city taking possession of them?
I don't know.
The
It was a
HOH, their HOH, they should be collecting the due to take care of it.
yeah.
Well, and now, sorry to talk out of turn, but now it's in somebody's backyard. Like there are two houses, like in the past, I could see, okay, that's okay. But now there are houses being built right in front of it.
Mhm.
So
I'll get the city attorney to look at what the terms were when we accepted the donation to see what our obligations are to replace the equipment. I do know that through the pros planning process, it has been identified as one of our parks.
mhm.
So it is considered a city park.
Did we legally accept it, even though we accepted it? Yes.
According to, no. Okay.
So I've got
Seems like
a
lot of money.
quick question for clarification, because I had some concerns on. So on this piece of paper. We're getting revenue from. The police equipment reserve fund and the fire equipment reserve fund for, let's see. 31 and 10-4,
Mhm.
but on this piece of paper, the end fund balance. Will be. Available. For equipment.
On that piece of paper, then the summary, that accounts for the reduction of this revenue in those two funds already.
On
So-
this one. So,
Mhm. So those balances already assume that this money has moved over to the general fund. So
what I didn't want to see is
those balances go down.
police or fire come begging the general fund to pay for something. We're just
Mhm.
smoothing out the 24 budget.
Yeah.
Out of all these areas on here. Okay,
Yes.
any other questions? On this? Is there more to go? Councilmember Anderson?
Sorry, you had mentioned at the last meeting too, there was a percentage thing, like X amount should be coming from those funds,
Mhm.
but it was coming out of something else. So does this reflect what it should be doing? I forget the exact numbers. I'm sorry, I should have brought my notes, but it was like, it's supposed to be a 60-40, but it was a 90-10. You
The
said
law
something
enforcement
about that.
contracts, they were being split 50-50 between the general
Yeah.
fund and the equipment reserve funds.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and this reflects a 90-10 split.
Got you. Thank you.
I would, going back to the playground equipment, so it's a $25,000 expenditure, which we're able to pull out of 035. Those 035 dollars, they come in based off of impact fees. So the reason that so it has an ending fund balance after this transfer out of $390,000. we can't use these dollars as freely as we can, like our park construction dollars. It's based on new development. So in combination of Elk Heights, whatever they paid for park impact fees at the time, as well as some of those other
Mhm.
developments in the general vicinity, they would pay impact fees, which should be able to fund the replacement of that equipment.
Mhm.
If it didn't, then the city would need to look at allocating these dollars towards new parks or new facilities in our parks.
Mhm.
Okay.
What is a park impact fee currently roughly? Oh, I don't remember that.
I can look it
If
up
you know
for
that.
you. It's on the taxes, rates and fees schedule.
While you're looking up, can I mention something?
Mhm.
I just want to get it on record. I am not all for like taking away parks. I just feel like I just want to put that out there. I am all for the kids and parks and I have been to that park. But when we talk about really our pros plan and like better parks for the city, like things across 410, how could we make better? I'm just like 25,000 is a lot of money to me that could be put elsewhere. So I just wanted to put that on
And
record.
it's also a matter of control.
Yes,
We want to
yeah,
control what our parks have, you know,
yeah,
the quality of the equipment, the
Mhm.
duration of the equipment,
yes.
all of that stuff. And we don't want to make it possible for a developer to pay a third of the money that he should have paid in mitigation to our fund that we would have allocated.
Yeah,
So it is a slippery slope.
yes,
And we can control it through ordinance.
yeah.
Mhm.
I just
And
wanted to put
get
that
ahead
out
of
there.
it. Get ahead of it. in the
Yeah.
ordinance.
I am not anti-park at all. Yeah.
And control the quality and quantity
Yes.
and the location of the parks.
Hmm.
Because we may not need the park to be in that particular
Ye-
location.
Yeah,
We may not want it to be because, again, we don't want the park to be accessible only to 3 or 4 houses.
hmm,
It needs to be accessible to the community.
yeah,
And the square footage of the park.
Yeah.
We can look at that next year, hopefully, kind of the parameters of if you're building X number of homes or X
Yeah.
number of parcels. How much square footage, because they put a little sliver in there and it
Right.
meets the
Well,
criteria.
it's the same thing we deal with the outfall, you know, with the sewer and the outfall. Forgetting the name of it, but anyway, it's the same thing. We need to do it on a community basis and not on a piece by piece.
mhm.
And allow it to be manipulated by the developer. If we're gonna manipulate it, we are.
Yeah.
If anybody's gonna manipulate it.
So our park impact fees for the 2023 fee schedule for a single family home, which includes duplexes, it's $1,624.70. And then for multifamily residential, it is $1,331.52, and that would be charged per unit.
We have 10 years to spend that. What's the,
10 years.
there's a limitation. We have to spend that money.
Within
And it
10
has
years.
to be for new park facilities or expansions to park facilities.
Yeah, so that's the other thing we need to look at. They can't sit in the account.
Right.
For too
Mhm.
long or we lose it.
So you could put that money towards this like Miller Park.
Mhm, absolutely.
Makes sense.
Councilmember Green.
Yeah, so first, as a fellow Community Services Committee member with Councilmember Anderson, I can attest that she is not anti-park. Very much pro-park. To all who are listening. I want to go back to the police equipment reserve and fire equipment reserve just to make sure I understand. So
Mhm.
for police equipment, it was 50-50. That was 50 general, 50
Reserve.
007.
Uh-huh.
And, but it's supposed to be 90-10 general 007 per ordinance. Is that what it is, or? how does
I'll
that
issue
work?
the correction. So when we looked up the original ordinance, it references contracts for jail and police dispatch, neither of which exist. We don't have an updated ordinance that addresses the types of contracts that we provide today. So we applied the same logic, but this next year as a housekeeping item, we should modify our ordinance. So there is nothing that requires a 90-10 or a 50-50 split for these specific contract types. For the police equipment reserve, it does have ananother potential funding source, which is 109, which if you look, has an ending fund balance going into 2020 or going into 2025. So end of 2024 ending fund balance of $514,287. Those dollars can be reallocated for police equipment, as well as some even general fund operating expenses potentially in the future. But typically that has been held for those large significant expenses that the police department encounters, like new vehicles, and when they had to get the body cameras, that would have been another example, maybe unexpected, mandated.
Yeah. Okay. And then for fire equipment reserve, is that just 50/50? Where does that land? And How does that play out?
Fire equipment reserve. Sorry, that one is in the code and it was being followed to the correct percentage. I want to say that one was a 90-10 with 90 going to equipment and 10 going to the fire station maintenance fund. For those, it goes to the equipment and the fire station maintenance fund, not to the general fund.
Okay. Gotcha.
I have a suggestion here. We should earmark any money that goes toward a park, Miller Park or any park, as coming out of mitigation. And if we do it up front, then it counts that 10 years goes away. So that's something we should do now in our budget, is identify any money that goes to any park as being allocated out of the mitigation money that we collect. In other words, spend the money first before we allocate any other funds to the creation of parks. Just to comment, because right now we're not allocating or earmarking any of the Miller Park money as being a result of mitigation. We should do that. Just
And when we get to the capital list, you'll see us in a few minutes. We didn't budget any additional funds onto Miller Park for next year, given the grants that we want to go after, so that there wasn't any supplanting problems. But definitely the impact fees that are sitting in park construction fund could go towards Miller Park. Absent.
I just want to make sure we don't lose that value.
Sure.
And then go, oh, shoot, we should have spent
I did
it
there.
out of this fund
Yeah.
and had it count. Because it's just a matter of numbering it the right way.
Looking at circling back to Councilmember Green's question regarding the fire and EMS equipment fund, 90% of the revenue from our contracts go into that fund. And then it says that council may also allocate an appropriate portion of the EMS levy. So I don't see anything specific to the other 10% of the contract.
I think it does go into the fire station maintenance fund. But yes, it doesn't necessarily, I think if you look at the fire station maintenance fund,
It probably says
it says 10%. So all of the DSHS contract for Rainier School is then going towards equipment and or facilities for fire. Yes.
Thank you.
Moving on, there are two other dates given from
So
staff.
this other last long list of ones, list of capital projects included in the 24 budget. Just wanted to put a quick list together for you. We will have for the final budget, the more spreadsheet looking one where you can be able to see the projects across all funds. But we hadn't talked too much about the capital projects in any of our sessions to date. So wanted to be able to provide that to you. So council had a clear picture of what projects were included in the 24 budget from a capital standpoint. So in Fund 102 for our arterial streets, it's the Main Street, the River Avenue to 410 improvements with the pedestrian there. And then West Mason, Natchez to Hinkleman extension, and Spruce Street, Main Street to Masons. That 50,000 on the Spruce Street is just the beginning for the design. If there's no construction dollars, that will come in 25. 307, the Capital Improvements Fund, is the CHAMP project is in there at the base allocation cost, correct? The base cost. The Foothills Trail parking, now that we have the bids in, that will have construction dollars for next year. Youth Center exterior improvements, a little bit of money to do some siding repair. Continuing at the MPC, the improvements. Next year, they'll be finishing the court security office up front. And then the Miller Park, which is a carryover mostly from the dollars that we had budgeted this year for initial design, but no construction dollars yet. And Fund 308, the continuation that we had budgeted this year for the Beverly Street extension, that will be getting farther along, has started this year, but that will be getting farther along into the construction phase next year for that street extension. In the sewer construction fund, the one that you, well, there's the White River Property Access Gate relocation. We always have a wastewater treatment plant mechanical replacements budget in there. There's a SCADA upgrade for the wastewater treatment plant. The initial start of the Spruce Street sewer. So just like in the street fund, Spruce Street is just has the design, but not construction dollars yet. Fence relocation on the new property by the wastewater treatment plant, and that project then carries across water, sewer, and storm. So you'll see a little piece of that in each one. I&I study, inflow and infiltration study for sewer, and a decant facility site study, which you'll also see that one down in storm as well. Water construction fund, a water system plan update. It's time for that. Some money for troubleshooting the trail well, copper wind valve replacements, some additional funding for Transmain access road repairs. Then there was some funding for a pre-design on the water treatment plant expansion, Natchez well repairs. We budget each year for some Transmain project segments. So Chris would be able to address which particular segments they are, but we budget for some of those each year. The fence relocation as well. The Spruce Street water main replacement. So that goes along with the other pieces of the Spruce Street. Then the Main Street water main. So that will be the full design and construction on the water main ahead of doing the street improvements. Since dig up the road first and then make the improvements after that, and a reservoir siting study, and then some additional funding towards the AMR meters. They are continuing to purchase as they go and replace the meters, and hoping to be able to get working towards getting those up and running. We'll be having some meetings with the company that deals with the software portion of it, maybe before year end, first part of next year. And then some in Main Street biofilter project and stormwater, a stormwater rate study also needed. Bevelo storm improvements that go along with the street expansion. The beginning pieces for the Spruce Street on storm improvements, the fence relocation, another portion for the decant facility site study, and then East Mason Avenue biofilter. So wanted to present those projects to the council since we hadn't discussed capital in detail. If there was any questions.
Questions, comments from council? Moving along.
Those were the materials that we have heard. Oh, and I believe them. Did you want to address? Mayor passed out an additional handout, a small one with some numbers at the top that he wanted to address.
Yeah, this is just, you can see their cost increase over the last 5 years. On fuel alone, over 100%. Obviously, we know why that is.
Mhm.
And moving on down the list, that there's some large. So when we all get questions from the community and anyone at large, I mean, this is what we're up against. Everybody's up against it in their personal budgets, and the city is as well. I'm not exactly sure what we pay for $1 or for a gallon of fuel, but we have it delivered and so on and so forth. It's not cheap. So all of those things affect our checkbook just like any homeowner. So just wanted to touch on, I mean, you can see the medical insurance, I mean, huge dollars of it. It isn't just us spending, buying, there's still no spray park. There's no fancy, super fancy gold arches or anything. So it's, I mean, inflation is hurts us in many ways more so than an individual home. And it all adds up. So
I will say this is very helpful. And this proposed budget does not raise taxes except for the TBD for the 1.1% of the sales tax. We have balanced the proposal to smooth out this budget. It came from everything we've seen. And this is lucky for 24. It may not be the same for next year. But this sheet of paper, we all feel, every one of us and every person in attendance and everybody listening who may listen to this and everybody who lives here, they all live this. This is not just Buckley. This is everyone in the state. Things cost, your dollar does not go very far anymore.
Yeah.
Councilmember Tremblay.
The only thing that's a little mislabeled is the value of our property has gone up. You know, so when we look at our liability insurance and the insurance on the value of property we own, that value has gone up considerably. So we need to keep that in mind. They're not all straight line. You know, the fuel is one thing, but the value of our own city property is, well, you know, what have we gone up in property values in the last 10 years? It's significant.
Point well taken.
Yeah.
Point well taken. But medical insurance has been a thing for the last 15 years,
Yeah.
you know, and it's
No, I'm just clarifying that.
the
our
other thing,
property
you're right.
values
Yes.
Have gone up, as has our population.
Yep, and then our inflow of money from the increase of property value,
Yeah,
but it isn't enough to offset the
no,
inflation.
no, it never is.
No,
Councilmember Smith, I just wanted to clarify, when you addressed increase of taxes, I just want to make sure everyone remembers that the budget does include the 1% optional increase on the property tax.
Yes, yes.
And that we're
yes.
proposing the EMS levy next year.
Yes,
So
yes.
just wanted to clarify those two.
Yes, exactly. But it's not exorbitant. Any other comments? Councilmember Burbank.
Do the changes on the blue and green sheet account, the increase in the city's insurance? The increase, right?
Mhm.
Okay, sorry, okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, this is, yeah.
It doesn't
was-
account for AMR, which was the other thing that we discussed at the
Okay.
last meeting. We'll bring that back probably after final adoption.
After
Definitely
final-
after final adoption, because you're seeing that next week. So
Okay,
Yeah.
we're not proposing to increase that cost at this time. We're looking at options, but that might be something that you see first part of
So we'll
next
see the
year.
Options
Mhm.
next year or next week, we're gonna start talking about that.
No, we need some more time before we
Okay.
can bring forward some options. It does look like we will be working with AMR for at least some period of time. Whether
Okay.
that's 3 months, 6 months, the chief is still working out
Working
some
on it.
different
Okay.
scenarios.
okay.
And then we'll bring that forward to council. We have some stakeholder meetings going on to see what our funding options are.
Okay.
Okay.
So the radios, is that in here? The
No.
radio increase, is that also? a next
Intentionally not.
Later thing?
Yes.
Okay.
That one got left out on.
Yeah.
Any comments and questions by council from these 4 items we received from staff today? Other than that, we all have a copy of the preliminary budget. Are there any questions, comments, et cetera? Again, we all nodded that we wanted this because we got to do our due diligence.
The only comment I have is I want to commend our staff for being able to come up with a budget that we can accept, swallow, however you want to put it. And I know it hasn't been easy, especially with the way things are nowadays. So I just want to thank our staff for bringing this forward and making it easy for us, actually. Is that something that our community will accept and that we can live with?
absolutely.
Thank you.
There's a lot of moving parts, especially here at the tail end.
Yes.
Is it
Lot
not
of players.
true that at the 28th regular council meeting, there's another public hearing?
Yes, next week
There's got to
is,
be 3, right?
Mhm.
We've only had 1.
We've had 2.
We've had
We have
2,
the
so this
revenue-
will be 3.
This will be the third. And
And
final.
we can adopt and based on what we hear from the community, they have their option to public hearing.
Mhm.
Any other comments, questions, anything about this budget process? I must say, in my 6 years on council, this has been the smoothest. I believe the smoothest and most transparent. And the new tool is great, the budgeting tool and the way you look at it And the way that this is explained on how we only did the 0.1 and then for the TBD and then the property tax thing, and then to smooth, so we didn't have to go drastic. To me, this is like artistry, the way it was done. And
There's
it's,
some art to it.
well, it takes people that can think and explain it to us. Anything else? Well, here it is. It's 6:37 on the 21st of November. I wish each and every one of you a very happy Thanksgiving with your families and your friends. We will adjourn and we'll be back here next Tuesday. Buddy?
Thank you,
Thank you.
council.
If you don't want it.
I have